About legal blogging, how to get started. So we are covering the basics of how to start your own legal blog. I am Nicole Abboud, and I'll tell you more about myself in a little bit. And my co-host today is Nick Rishwain from Experts.com.
Yes. Yep. And this is about our fourth or fifth together, right? Webinars, and so we're glad we have a lot of new names on this one. So we're glad you're all here today. Thank you. All right. So if you're wondering if you're in the right place,
what do you do? If you're wondering why you're here,
if you're wondering why you're here,
here,
you already know. But you've been thinking about starting a legal blog and you haven't for whatever reason. You can put your excuses. There's a ton of excuses. Time constraints, don't know what to write, all sorts of things. We've been there. Tell us what what's blocking you from getting started. We'll also be covering what the basics of getting started in this particular webinar. You probably have realized the importance of content marketing and the value that it provides. So we're going to be going over some of that for branding and marketing purposes today. Are you looking to build your personal brand, or at least your law firm's personal brand, maybe a combo of the two? That is one of the reasons that you blog, one of several. And maybe you need a creative outlet, right? Maybe because it's not necessarily that you are going to blog about practicing law. So we're going to talk about what your blog's going to be about as well.
Mm-hmm. So a little bit of what we're actually going to cover today. We're going to talk about the secret to getting started. We're going to talk about how to choose a topic and name for your blog. So that's usually where a lot of people get hung up. So we're going to work through that today. We're going to discuss finding your voice. So what is the tone you're going to set in your blog? What's your message? We're going to also cover how to keep your audience in mind. That's definitely very important when you're blogging. How to come up with some content ideas, right? So what do you even write about every time you sit in front of your computer or pick up that pen and paper? How to promote your blog, and then we'll leave some time for some Q&A. And of course, throughout all of this, keep in mind that these are the basics. We're laying down the foundation. That's not to say that if you've already started a blog, this won't be helpful, but a lot of this will be just how to even get started, because that's usually where people get stuck. So that's what we're covering.
Yeah. So a little bit about me. I'm Nick Rishwain. I am the Vice President of Client Relations and Development at Experts.com, and that is an online marketing platform for expert witnesses and consultants. And so I've had a lot of experience with many of the attorneys that we interact with who have their own blogs, legal blogs and personal blogs, etc. And with the experts that we do the marketing for, or our members, we have a lot of them. They have a lot of articles on Experts.com. You can go to the homepage and see a list of our most recent articles. And in my spare time, I am the host of a live video podcast, is what we call it. It's called Legal Tech Live. I've been in the legal tech sector for nearly 7 years, and there's some pretty exciting developments in legal tech. And so that's where the show came from. I also host another social media show, co-host, called Social Chatter with the Social Chefs. So that's me, and I make really great miniature snowmen.
I was going to say, apparently you love making snowmen.
Yeah.
A pretty good one, too.
Yeah, not bad for the size.
It's good. It's a good one. I like to sit next to fireplaces, meanwhile. So my name is Nicole Abboud. I am an attorney. I'm the founder of Abboud Media. So we are a video marketing agency for lawyers, by lawyers. It's my new business that I'm super excited about. Love working with lawyers and helping them build their brands through video. I also host a podcast called the Gen Y Lawyer Podcast that I've had for about 2 years, where I interview and speak with pretty cool lawyers, young lawyers. And right there I have my little top 100 blog award from the ABA, which I got for my podcast. Granted, it is a podcast, but this kind of just goes to show you that I'm pretty familiar with blogging. I actually had a blog before I launched my podcast. It was a legal blog. Oh, there you have it. I didn't even get it.
Yeah, I have it.
I would get a copy of it, right?
Of course I was going to have it.
Good. Frame that. But either way, so I actually had a legal blog for about a year. It was called Code and Couture, and it was about fashion law, and I'm sure I'll talk about it throughout this webinar. So I maintained my own legal blog for a while. And before I started it, I attended every CLE I could about legal blogging. And I did so much research before I started. So I feel ready and prepared to talk to you guys about it. And then, of course, I've had my podcast for 2 years, which it has a blogging component to it. So that's a little bit about me.
All right. So what do we need to know about blogs? So first, let's give you some statistics. Many of these are from my case, and then we have one from Search Metrics. And this is what we found. In my case, a legal tech company had done some investigative reporting for us on this, and only about, at the time that this statistic, which was this a 2016 statistic?
Yes.
Statistic? Yeah, so last year, only about 26% of law firms report having blogs. So that's, only about a quarter of them have blogs. That's pretty low in this day and time, it seems.
Right, which is good and bad, right?
Good and bad.
There's room for new blogs to come in.
Good for our audience who are here to learn how to write a blog or to get started, really. It looks like, according to that same survey, lawyers were spending about 1.9 hours per week updating and maintaining their personal blog. So that's not a significant amount of time. It seems like about right.
Mm-hmm.
If time is what you're concerned about, think about it in those terms. Now, the first one is probably going to take you a little longer, but as you get used to it, it's going to go a lot faster. And 39% of those surveyed said that they had been retained by a client because of their blogging. So somebody must have read something and then informed them. They were able to identify that this particular client came from their blog. So, 40% of the respondents got some actual return on investment there, identifiable return on investment. And from Search Metrics, this is more blogging in general, the average word count of a top-ranking piece of content from a blog is between about 1,100 and 1,300 words.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's about a page and a quarter, or it's about 2 pages, right?
Yeah, probably
depending
about right.
If you do the old college double space,
right, or single space.
Yeah.
So, and the reason I threw that in there is because we hear a lot about how long a blog should be. And I was surprised to see that this is the length that a lot of top ranking blogs are getting, because that's definitely longer than I would have imagined, right? Because usually people say 300 to 500 or at most 700 words, but it's the longer form blogs that are winning in Google right now.
And I can tell you from experience with the articles that our members post on Experts.com that generally longer form content is performing better for our members.
Okay, good to know. So how to start? What's the secret to getting started? It's just to start. That is the secret, right? So I want you all, we can end the webinar right here and we're good. We have about 9 people. So I want you guys to close your eyes. Just do a little exercise with me. Close your eyes right now and just picture what it would feel like to be writing this blog, to have this blog up on your website or wherever you're going to house this blog. And imagine people, clients, or your intended audience finding your blog and reading your blog and reaching out to you and connecting with you because of your blog, right? So I want you to picture this, because it really is going to take you dreaming about this to really make it happen, right? So think about it.
One thing I would add to you about how to start is what Nicole and I have advised people as far as live video, social media, writing blogs, making videos. It's not just live videos, but recorded as well. It's really, you got to start. You have to get over the fear of it, so that, when we tell somebody to go live on Facebook Live or Periscope or something like that, the first one is never going to be your best one. There may be an exception to that rule, but it was the same way for my experience with Legal Tech Live. I'm assuming it was the same way for your podcast, Nicole, that the first one is not the best, but you have to do it and get past that fear of beginning.
Right. So what we're doing here is we're going to set some We're going to get over some mental hurdles, because I know we can learn the basics. We're going to show you what to do, what the tactics, the strategies are. But first, mentally, you have to decide that this is something you want to commit to, that this is something you're excited about and you really want to do, and you're willing to put in the work to do. And set a mental deadline for yourself, or an actual hard deadline for yourself of when you're going to launch this blog, right? So for mine, I actually gave myself which is probably longer than I should have, but I gave myself 2 months to do the research, to figure out what I want to do, to get everything set up, to write a few blog posts, and to launch. I gave myself a hard deadline and I stuck with it, right? So mentally prepare for this, okay? And I wasn't sure if you wanted to add anything, Nick, but I think
I think that's it.
good.
I mean, you set a deadline and you get it done because you have to post. At some point, you have to click send and stop the analysis, the paralysis by analysis.
Exactly.
So this will help you, because maybe you're not sure what you're going to be writing about. We have a few people who have in the chat told us what their practice is. We have one who practiced primarily. We have Sherry, who practices estate planning and probate. We have Tara, who started her own family law practice, and Chelsea, who responded as well, who says that she works in a firm practicing real estate law and mostly homeowner and condo association law. So those are potentially your initial topics, right? You want to decide, am I going to write on the law, or is it going to be something unrelated to the law? Because maybe what you want to do is something that's more of a passion project for you, or maybe you want to combine them. So for Sherry and Tara and Chelsea, do they want to talk about their practice area, or do they maybe want to talk about another area? Maybe one of your passions is following the Supreme Court and the decisions coming down from the Supreme Court, even if you're practicing in condo association law. So decide whether or not it's going to be totally about your practice, or if it's another area that you're interested in. You probably want to decide, do I want it educational or entertaining? So am I informing, or am I going to be entertaining folks with my blog? Maybe it's a combo of both. We're going to give you an example of one that I think actually does both very well. Think about what do you know and love? If it's underwater basket weaving and you love that, maybe you want to write about it. And maybe you want to do it separate from your law practice, because maybe you're looking for the creative outlet, as we talked about. That's some of the possibilities. For those who are looking to bring in more customers, look for that hole in the market. What is it in estate planning and probate that is missing, that somebody is just not discussing? Maybe that hole in the market is where you want to be. And then, do you want to go broad, or do you want to be niche? And this is, I can give you quite a few examples of many of the firms that I interact with. For those in personal injury, they go very broad most of the time, almost too broad, whereas I don't read a lot of their blog posts because it's so broad, but I do understand the reasons that they're going there, and that some of that's for search engine optimization and otherwise, but I think they would perform much better if they were narrowing it and maybe telling us about fact patterns and maybe making it a little bit more entertaining. So rather than have you been injured in a car accident in Stockton, California, which is where I'm located, that is not necessarily the title that's going to make me want to go and read that blog. But if you say beach-going victim mauled by dog, okay, let's see what this is about. And then maybe you bring in some facts from one of your clients, and not giving away any confidential information, but maybe you tell them the facts of the case in a more narrative style, and maybe that's what you write about. So just some ideas there on whether it's broad or niche, and how to kind of conceptualize what you're going to be writing about.
Yeah, so this is actually something that a lot of other young lawyers have reached out to me and asked about, what should they even write about. So whether you're going solo or you work for a firm, although you might be a little bit limited in your choices if you work for a firm, but when you're sitting down to think about what it is you want to write about, what this entire blog is going to be about, not the individual posts within the blog, a lot of lawyers want to go, like you said, broad because they think it's going to cover everything. It's going to attract more people, and it might, but it's always recommended that you try to carve out some angle, some kind of niche for your blog. So if you practice family law, you could make it general, just about general family law topics. That's fine. That's your decision to make. Or you can make it about father's rights, for example, right? That can be your blog. That can be your little niche within family law.
Right.
So once you've kind of given some thought as to what your blog is going to be about, what the subject matter is, if it's going to be law related or not, if it's going to be practice related or not, broad, niche, when you give it some thought, next comes, what are you going to name it, right? So and these don't necessarily have to be in order, right? But what are you going to name your blog? Another area that gets a lot of people hung up, or a lot of people get hung up on. So just a few tips on what to name this blog. What are you going to call it? So you want to definitely think of a name that indicates what you're talking about, right? So you want to name it something that's going to be that when people read it, they'll know what it's about, right? You don't want it to be some mysterious title that only you know what it means, right?
Right.
You want people to read it and understand that this is a blog about personal injury, right? Whatever you end up calling it.
Right.
You want to keep it simple and memorable because people are not going to remember a very complicated or long blog name. So keep it simple, keep it memorable. You definitely want to check the domain name availability. So once you have some idea as to what you want to call it, I would go and just go on GoDaddy or just go check to see if that domain name is even available for you to get, because you want it. Sorry, you might hear my dog barking in the background. Because you want to make sure that domain name matches up to your blog name. So hopefully it's available. And then if there are any trade name issues, you probably want to check up on that as well, because we are lawyers and that is something we should know, right? If you can, try to go, well, not if you can, if you're interested in making it something witty, definitely go for that if it makes sense and it's a smart kind of witty, right? Not a silly one. So I think you found an example of a good one.
So this example is probably my favorite legal blog. It's called Pirated Thoughts. It's by an attorney out of New York. His name's Michael Lee. I think he was also honored in the ABA's Blog 100 with you, and he does a really entertaining job of, it's obviously intellectual property related, trademark, copyright issues like that. But he does, covers some very fun, he does it in a very fun way. He creates his own images on the blog, and usually the stories it could be something comic related or something really bizarre going on in copyright or trademark infringement areas. And it is just, it's a pleasure to read it. And it's always just a fun read, and he's got quite a following because of he used it as a combo creative outlet and educational for folks. And so it's a really fun one. I would highly recommend you go and check it out. It's at www.piratedthoughts.com. And then you could also go with a more descriptive type of blog name. What's a more descriptive one?
Like attorney at work is one. And some of these overlap, but another great example of a blog name is Real Lawyers Have Blogs. So that's Kevin O'Keefe's, which I'm sure I'll mention throughout this. You can make it more straight to the point, right? So if you don't want to use anything fancy or think of anything witty or descriptive, you can straight up just go with the practice area, maybe your name, maybe your firm name is in there somehow. I believe you found Michigan auto law.
Yep.
There's no debate as to what that's about, right?
No debate about what that's about. And that is actually a combination of their website, and the blog is on the website. So the blog is not a separate website. So, but you get the feeling right up front, they're Michigan attorneys, and they deal with car accidents, any sort of automobile accident injury related law.
I found another one that was called Prison Law Blog. So that's actually, I mean, that sounds interesting, and it's just describing exactly what it's about, right? There's nothing fancy about that. Another descriptive one is called The Fashion Law. And that one is obviously straight to the point as well, but you really don't have to rack your brain too much about this, right? So it can be exactly what the blog is about. If if you come up with something that's exciting and a little bit witty, go with that, assuming it's available. I would use a thesaurus. I know it seems like common sense maybe, but I actually used that when I was thinking of names for my blog. I picked up a thesaurus and I just looked for synonyms of words that I wanted to use, but I thought maybe, or maybe they were taken once I actually Googled them. So I looked up synonyms, something along the same lines, to see if that would work as well. And finally something came to mind. So I ended up using code and couture because, like I said, mine was about fashion law. So I talked about the law and about fashion. So that's the code. So code and couture being the fashion aspect of it. I found another one that was called Hurston on Tennessee family law. So Hurston is the lawyer, I believe. So this guy or gal, actually, I didn't catch if it was a girl or a guy. They just put their name in there, right? Yep. There's another one, I think, is it Brian on, have you read it? It's Brian on legal writing, I believe it's called, or Brian.
No, I have not read that one.
Okay, so another blogger, very popular blogger, and I feel bad for not remembering his name right now, but he writes about being a better legal writer and just writer in general. And his is his last name on writing. So it's possible to throw your last name in there if you want.
Yeah. Right. And you'll remember that that sounds much like the restatements that we read in law school when it was something so-and-so on the law. They're using a play on it.
Yeah.
They're using a play on that for their blog, which is pretty fun.
Yeah. Play on words is always acceptable.
Yep.
And remember, the name will not make or break your blog. Sorry to break it to you, but it is not it's important, right? People are going to read that first and it's going to attract certain people, the people you want to read it, but it is not, ultimately, it's not the most important thing because it's the content that you're writing that's going to be more important than the name of the blog at the end of the day. So don't spend months thinking about the name.
That's right. Good point. So we have joining us now our friend Mitch Jackson. And some other names have popped in. We've got Jalen Jenkins is in here, Greg Stannard. So thank you all for showing. We appreciate it and hope you're finding some value here. And so let's talk now about finding your voice for your blog. When we think about describing your avatar, what is your online persona essentially? What would that person be writing about? What is it that you want to get across to your audience? Are you going to have a spin or a unique angle on your blog? The Canna Law blog is a cannabis law blog happening here in California. Big news these days. Mm-hmm. So she has her own spin on all of the legal ramifications of our new laws. Mm-hmm. So what is your unique angle going to be? What is Chelsea's angle going to be on condo association, homeowners association laws? Do you think that there needs to be some legislative changes? Do you think that what do you think that a homeowner needs to know, or what is it that the association might need to know? You may want to do it from both different perspectives. So what is your spin on it? Is anyone else writing about it? Now, I refer you to the information we shared at the beginning, which was that only 26% of lawyers have a blog. So there's a chance that nobody else is writing about what you're thinking about writing it, or they may not be writing about it in your locale, which is important because this could really differentiate you from the other lawyers in your own practice, in your area, in your region. So think about, is anyone else writing about it? If they are writing about it, go back to that second bullet point. What different spin or unique angle can you put on the blog that differentiates you from somebody else who's writing about this topic? Mm-hmm. And then what is your personality type? Are you a total type A person? Do you want to use some humor or some sarcasm? Or do you want to be a little jokey? Do you want to be, hyper intellectual about it in your writing? Is your goal to sort of write your own restatement of this law, this area of practice that you are active in? Think about your personality type and how you're writing in how you're going to come across, your writing style is going to come across in your blog. Mm-hmm. So think about that. What do I want to achieve with it? And what is my style? My style tends to be a little bit more humorous, a little bit more lighthearted. Nicole has a very similar writing style as far as she likes to have a little more fun. Well, but you don't have to do it that way. You find what works for you.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's definitely a really important point that you make. And also acknowledge that over time, the more you write, the more your personality will develop
Mm-hmm.
and will appear in your writing. When I first started my blog, I was a third-year associate. I was nervous to show my personality in my writing. I thought it had to be very serious. I thought it had to be very filled with legalese. And over
Mm-hmm.
time, I just loosened up a little bit. I learned what worked for me because that legalese didn't work for me. And people started to hear my personality when they read my blog. And now when I send out emails, when I write blog posts, people tell me this all the time. They feel like they hear me talking to them in person when they read my stuff, which is exactly what I
get, and I can vouch for that. I get that exact same experience when I receive your emails. I'm like, I can hear Nicole talking to me in this email, and I like it because I like Nicole. So that's how this can work. It's like, okay, this is great. I know her personality, and this fits.
And that's how you want it to work, right? You don't want to be just words on a page. You want people to hear your voice, or at least imagine what your voice would sound like when they're reading your stuff. Because if the point of your blog is to start a conversation with people and get these potential clients or readers to reach out to you, then this blog is gonna break down some barriers. And when they do reach out to you, they're gonna feel like they know you already. So you want that personality in your writing, and don't be afraid to showcase it. Because whoever you want reading your blog is going to get it, right?
That's right.
So let's see if I can flip the page. So that kind of brings us to a very important point. When you've given some thought as to how you want it to sound, how you're going to showcase your personality, how you're going to find your voice and message, it's also equally important to keep your audience in mind. I see people writing in the chat room, but I can't monitor. So I don't know, Nick, if there's anything good.
I am monitoring, and let me hold you there because our friend Mitch Jackson is in the room with us, and he said he asked this question. Let me answer it live.
Okay.
He says that I've been told that you need to pick a subject or topic that you can easily write 50 plus posts about right away to avoid content creation issues. Asks us, do you agree, or are there considerations new bloggers may want to think about? And I personally disagree with this question, or disagree with the 50 plus posts, because I'm not sure when you first start that you're gonna think of what you could write about. We're doing stuff very basic today. You may not even know your first topic. So I would be surprised that somebody is going to decide, well, I could write 50 or so posts on this particular subject matter. So I think it's more like, what is it that I want to communicate? What do I want to get across? How do I want to show my thought leadership? And can I write 4 or 5 posts about it? Mm-hmm. And then as you start writing, I think you're gonna find what your next post is going to be about. And in fact, your blog may narrow or it may broaden depending on how those posts go and when you get comfortable with the writing. What are your thoughts? Do you think that they have to?
No, I tend to agree with you, Nick. And maybe Mitch's number is arbitrary. I don't know. But I agree with where he's going with it in terms of pick something you feel like you can write a lot about. Mm-hmm. But I do agree with you in terms of I would be careful not to write too many or think that I can write 50 on one subject, because you don't know if that subject after 5 posts is even something you care about as much as you thought it was when you sat down.
As you begin writing, or as you begin on video, any one of these subjects that you begin with, you're going to evolve over time, as well as your persona. Your online persona is going to evolve over time, and you may change the direction. So that is, I would think that thinking about 50 might be so overwhelming that you just may not even start to begin with if you're thinking in those terms. So,
but the essence is pick something you're passionate about, that you could potentially write 50, but
yes, you could potentially. I think that's right.
That's probably what he means. But definitely good advice. And quickly, I want to share this one for going back to the personality. I know a blogger who writes for Above the Law who starts off all his legal posts with a rap song quote, which you would not think would have any place in a legal blog, but it makes sense. He connects it to what he's writing about, and I love it because you start off with a rap song, it can only go up from there.
Right, right. It's a good, humorous, and fun way to start something. So.
Yeah.
What do we need to think about our audience?
In terms of your audience, like I said, equally as important, because these are the people who are going to read your stuff, read your blogs. And that's actually a question you should ask yourself. Who do you want reading your posts? Do you want current clients to read it? So is this something you're going to send out to your current clients? Do you want potential clients to read this? Which means are you hoping a random person who's looking for an answer online or who needs legal help online comes across your post? Is that who your intended audience is? Is it your friends? Is it is it other lawyers that you're speaking to? Is your audience another lawyer or legal scholars or legal professionals, right? Important to keep in mind who it is you're speaking to through your blog post, because that's going to shape the tone as well. Because if you're speaking to other lawyers, you can throw in big fancy words and they'll get it, right? But if your intended audience is someone who's looking for an estate planning attorney, then you're not going to use legalese because they're not going to get it. You're going to use words that lay people understand and describe things a little bit further than you would need to if you're talking to another lawyer, right? So keep them in mind because that's going to shape how you write. Will the individual blog post titles lure your potential reader in? So when you're writing the blog post, keep them in mind, but also when you're writing the title for each individual blog post, keep them in mind as well. As in, what is something they would likely be searching for if they went on Google to search for an answer to their problem, right? Because you want your post to show up.
Right.
So keep them in mind for that. Overall, your intended audience is your avatar, right? So that's the person that you need to visualize when you're writing. And I would go so far as to say, try to really visualize an actual person. So describe them to a T, male, female, what color hair, where do they work, what do they do, what do they enjoy doing for fun. So try to really visualize this avatar and have them in front of you. On a paper in front of you when you're writing. Because I actually did that when I first started my podcast. I had an actual image that I drew out and I pretended like I was talking to her when I was interviewing my guests, or I pretended like she was listening in. It really helped when you're just sitting there thinking, who's going to read this? You need to know who's going to read this, right?
Yeah.
What would your audience want to read, right? So that kind of guides your topics. What is something they'd be interested in reading? Because oftentimes we think we want to write about something because we're interested in it, but it's not about us. It's about what they would want to read, your audience.
Unless you're doing one, I would say, unless you've decided you want to write it about, and we're not opposed to this idea, we're presuming you want to write it about your practice in order to bring in more clients. But if you're looking to start a blog as a creative outlet altogether, you're going to find your audience. If you want to talk about your travels or I personally like watching what's going on in artificial intelligence and robotics. That is cool to me. I like that stuff. So I might just want to start one just about that. It's totally unrelated to my work. So we're presuming that you're wanting to do it for building your practice, but you can think a little bit less, I would say, about who your avatar is if you're doing your passion project only.
I see. Yeah. Okay. Where would they want to read it? So where are they likely to go and search for something like your blog? Does your blog help them? Does it entertain them? Does it teach them something, right? And does it invite a conversation, most importantly? Is there something in there indicating that you want to continue the conversation with your readers? Because that's the whole point. You're inviting them into this conversation with you. You don't want it to be one-sided. So what are you going to include in there that's going to continue the conversation or take it off the blog post and continue it in real life or online somewhere?
Right. So I want to stop. I'm sorry, Greg. Greg Stannard had sent us a message here, and I almost missed it. He says, great info, which we appreciate. Thank you, Greg. And he says, concerns about oversaturation with legal blogs. I hear what you're saying. And I've seen this oftentimes, Greg. and I'm assuming we have, I know Mitch is here, but I do see it a lot in personal injury, where there's some serious oversaturation in the blog posts and the content that they're posting. And Mitch, chime in the chat if you would, if you see the same thing in personal injury and sometimes in criminal law, that they're not finding that unique spin or the unique angle to the practice, and they're just pumping it out as though it's a template. We need to talk about the amusement park. This is not really a strike against personal injury. I think they had learned this from somebody who was teaching them what to write about, but amusement park injuries in California, or amusement park injuries in Florida, or dog bite injuries in Orlando, Florida. I see a lot of this similar stuff come up in injury and negligence areas, in the tort areas, and some in criminal law. So depending on what your practice is, think about how you can put your unique spin, your unique angle, and we're going to give you a couple ideas for doing that shortly. But there is some oversaturation in certain areas, which means you really want to think through how are you going to differentiate your blog from what you're seeing that is oversaturation. Do you have any thoughts on that, Nicole?
Yeah, and so yes, I do agree. Certain areas do seem to be a little bit more crowded in terms of blog topics. But going back to that figure in the beginning, only 26% of lawyers are blogging. Granted, that's still a big number because there are a lot of lawyers, but just like with anything, if we're going to think about how many have already done it and how many are out there, we'd never start, right? Because no one's reinventing the wheel here, but you're jumping in there, right? You're contributing, you're adding your own thoughts to the world. And if you're not able to figure out a unique angle, that's okay too. Maybe just your content has to be so gosh darn good that that's what makes it stand out, right? So sure, there's thousands of personal injury blogs, but most of them suck. So make sure yours doesn't, and that's how you'll stand out.
That's how you differentiate. And maybe that's where I think of as unique angle in that area is it's going to be yours, but how can you read some of what other people are writing and see if you feel the same way I do as a non-practicing attorney, see if you feel the way that I do about some of these. They're very, very almost come off of a template, and see how you might do it differently, and think about how you could put that spin on the dog bite or on the car accident or on the wrongful death that makes yours more informative, more educational, or a better read. Maybe it's just a better read. And then think about titling it somewhat differently so that it's not that standard, almost boilerplate, if you will, blog post. So here's some content ideas. Here's some ideas that are essentially going to help you differentiate yourself. So some of the items you're probably going to want to do some evergreen content. Nicole, tell me what evergreen content is for those who don't know.
Sure. So evergreen content is content or subject matter that is going to be relevant today and relevant for the most part 5 years from now. That kind of idea. So it is something about your practice area that is pretty set. It's pretty general, right? So it's not addressing a specific code section, for example, that may or may not change, but it's just an overview of how to get a divorce, for example, right?
That's right.
So something that's going to be good for a while.
What are your for our let's see, from Sherry, estate planning and probate issues. Sherry, you may want to talk about the living trust in one post, or
like what is a living trust?
What is it?
That's going to be good.
What do we need? What is somebody who's coming from the first time you post that blog to somebody who comes 3 or 4 years from now? Now you may have to update it if there's a code change or a new statute or something like that. But maybe a living trust, maybe like the 10 basics of estate planning, maybe that just has to be written, and maybe you can't make that one too fancy. But then the next thing that you might want to do is something that's more timely, or what is often referred to as newsjacking. So for the estate planning, where I have actually witnessed it done very well, is when there is one of the big, very wealthy families or very famous families gets into a brutal contest over an estate, brutal litigation, and maybe one of them is having some competency issues. They're fighting over whether or not the person was competent or there was undue influence or something like that. You can take that type of an article, and these come out that I've seen, there's probably 2 or 3 a year where it's the family is going after the money and it's getting, there's blood in the water and the sharks are out and they all want to get a piece of it. Well, you can put your own spin on this for estate planning issues, how to avoid this type of issue, how to make sure that your trust or your will is written to avoid this type of battle, to prevent litigation amongst your family, or tell them about what issues you're seeing based on the news that you think are valid issues and what you think you would be arguing in that particular case if you were representing somebody like this. Mm-hmm. So that's timely because it's probably a big story. When we say timely, it's a big story that just recently came out, and it's going to be talked about over and over. One of the ones that we did a lot of stuff about was when Hulk Hogan was fighting with Gawker, and expert witnesses were being called in to testify about the video that was posted. That was there's a lot of money on the line, and Gawker ended up going eventually bankrupt and had to sell off its company. And in that situation, we did a lot of posts about, and not necessarily blog posts, but we did videos, we shared articles, we did things like that over the expert witness in such a case. So that's how you do something that's timely or something that's newsjacking. Timely would also be if there's a new law coming out, new law on estate planning, new law on homeowners associations, that you may need to make your potential customers aware of, then you talk about something like that as in its timely. Look, on January 1st, 2018, this is going to be the change. Right. Then it's timely.
Yeah. I think also if you're sitting down to write and you're just at a complete loss as to what to write about, there are a few things that you can do aside from just, if you can't come up with any evergreen content on your own. I would turn to Google. Just look for, so a few things with Google. Obviously, you can look to see what other lawyers have written about, and you can adopt some of that, make it your own. You can start typing in a few words of what you think you want to write about and just let Google's search options, the little, what do you call it? Just the drop-down menu of potential search options, let that guide your way. You'd be surprised how effective that is. It really does give you some good options. You can look at other lawyers frequently asked questions tab on their websites to see what kind of questions they get. And these are lawyers in a similar practice area. Or just think to the questions that you get all the time. What's something clients ask you about all the time, and you find yourself repeating the answer to a whole bunch of different clients that you can just write one blog post to and send that or put that on your website.
Yep.
So what are questions you get often? Write about that. I listed a few resources. Nick, you can talk about Hashtagify in a sec because you probably know more about it. But one that I use often is BuzzSumo. So you just go to buzzsumo.com. You can actually type in what you're interested in writing about, so a topic, and it will generate all the other articles all the top articles that have been written about that topic. And that kind of gives you an idea as to how interesting your topic might be, how interesting that blog post might possibly be, because if another person wrote about it and it got thousands of shares, then it's an interesting topic, and maybe there's room for you to write about that. Yep. So you will rarely be at a loss for content ideas. You can always reach out to a friend and ask them, hey, what would you want to know about real estate?
Yeah, that's a great idea. And I will talk about Hashtagify me, but Tamara has a question here that I think is now good.
Hey,
Tamara McCormick asks a question. Yes, and hi, Tamara. What are your thoughts about starting a traditional blog versus vlogging in today's environment of consumers who have short attention spans?
I feel like this is a setup for me.
It does seem like a setup, but it's also going to be probably part of what we cover in our next webinar, which
right.
we'll do on video.
Which is going to be on video.
Yeah.
So here's what I think. And I waver back and forth on the attention span of people, because I feel like even if content is long and if it's good, people will watch, they'll read. In terms of vlogging versus blogging, so creating videos or creating written word, obviously written words are still very important for SEO purposes, for search engine rankings, and for them to even find you, which is something that you don't get with video, unfortunately, unless you have, and you should have, some kind of written blog that goes along with the video that you're creating. So written content is still going to be important for those purposes. And there are still some people who prefer reading over watching video. If your audience prefers that, and you would know more about your audience, then write, blog. But video obviously is very important. There's going to be much more emphasis on video going forward. So if that's something you're interested in, then you'll need to join us for our next webinar.
That's right.
But blogging, I think is still important.
Yes, I agree. And probably a combination of video, written word, etc., is how you want to start looking at your overall digital marketing plan. So Hashtagify Me, or Hashtagify.me, is basically a place for you to go to see what other, and this is for posting your blog to Twitter, which we're going to get to shortly, but this is going to tell you what other hashtags are really being used around the one that you're going to use. So if Sherry's going to use probate as a hashtag, it's going to tell you what other hashtags are popular, what other ones she may want to use in multiple postings of this blog post. Other common ones that are used near or around or commonly used if probate's been used are estate plan, trusts, will, law, and some interesting ones that I wouldn't have picked up. Somebody uses the Queen of Probate hashtag. Wills is another one. Real estate, another one. And interestingly, LGBT. So estate planning for the LGBT community seems to be common.
And see, that gives you an idea for another blog post that you probably didn't even think about.
That you may not have thought about, because I wouldn't have thought that would have been, many of those seem very similar. Wills, trust, estate plan. Those are the ones I would have thought of off the bat. Real estate, LGBT, and interestingly enough, and Queen of Probate, those I would have had no idea about, but you may want to see who the Queen of Probate is, or who uses that hashtag. That may be something to check out.
Yeah.
So
I think also another quick tip that I heard someone give once, and I thought it was kind of genius. Go pick up tabloids. So pick up a tabloid, or like People magazine or Us Weekly, and get ideas there, because that stuff is interesting, right? Like, they know how to write a story that people actually want to read. They're juicy, they could be gossipy, but get some ideas there as to what people are reading, and see if you can relate it to the law somehow, if that's what you end up writing about. So get ideas from those kind of magazines.
Yep, very good idea. Yeah. So what platforms and resources do we have for folks?
All right, so, and of course, keep in mind, this is very, very basic, so we're not going to be able to delve into all of these. But if you've decided you do want to start a blog, then there are different platforms, as in places online that you can actually house your blog. So WordPress.com is that's the one I use. So it's the one I used to use. So it's the one I'm most familiar with. If anyone here has used any of the others, please chime in and let me know how the others work as well. But WordPress.com is a free hosting website for bloggers. You can pay to just replace. So with WordPress.com, you would have to keep the name WordPress in the title unless you want to buy a domain and throw that in there instead. But because it's free, usually WordPress is still in the domain title. There's WordPress.org. That's the free, that's the paid version of it. But that one requires you to do a little bit more work. So WordPress.com is much easier. It's very user-friendly. It's very plug and play. So you can easily set up a blog, even if you've never done it before. When I set mine up, I had never done it before, and I'm not techie at all. And I was able to figure things out. And it was basic, but it got the job done.
And I think the one thing I would add to that, because for the Experts.com blog, we use WordPress, and for Legal Tech Live, I also use WordPress. I think the one thing I would add to that is you probably don't want to use just the free version. As we talked about in the beginning, you're probably going to want to have your own domain name. So you don't want to have just jalenjenkins.wordpress.com. You're probably going to want jalenjenkins.com or something to that effect, or homeownerslaw.com or something to that effect. So I would say my recommendation would be you're probably going to have to spend a little bit of money, but it's pretty fair pricing.
Yeah, not too expensive. Squarespace is another one that I've heard is actually user-friendly as well. There's Weebly that I'm not very familiar with, but I know bloggers use it. Wix, Tumblr, of course. You can use, if you already have a website, you can just add another page, another tab on your website and use that, right?
Yeah. Yeah, and I have seen lawyers use Tumblr quite a bit, or more than I would expect that they would be using it. So that's just something to keep in mind.
Right.
But that also generally has Tumblr in the title. So it's not that I've seen them have their own domain name for that.
Mm-hmm. There's also microblogging. So if you don't want to start any of these, but you want to get started, people use Facebook or LinkedIn's publishing platform to just post their blogs there, and that's perfectly fine as well, right?
Yeah,
the point is just to get started.
Yeah, just to get started, then thinking about that. In the long term, we certainly recommend you have your own real estate.
This is true.
So promoting your blog, well, how are you going to promote it? Well, in medium.com, that's another one where you don't have to have your own domain name. You can have your Medium profile, and that's one place to get started. So promoting your blog. Start with friends and family. It's not uncommon that Nicole will say, hey, can you listen to this podcast and maybe share it out? Same thing can go with the blog, and I'm happy to do that. We're not family, but we're friends, and so I'm happy to share it out. The same goes for other people who are in here. Tamara, we've got Mitch, and they're not afraid to reach out and say, hey, I've got this thing going on. Will you share it out? Start with friends and family. Then you post it to Facebook. You post it to LinkedIn. Maybe you send it out in your email list, in your newsletter. You may also take a version of it and put it up on Medium. You may not want to have it as the exact same content. You may have a shorter version of it on Medium, or even longer, or you may just write a sort of separate topic about it on Medium. And then there's blog directories. Now, I'm not familiar with the blog directories. Can you tell us a little bit more? Do you know much about these?
Sure. The only one that comes to mind is Real Lawyers Have Blogs. So that's, again, Kevin O'Keefe. I know that he aggregates, or people not too familiar as to how it works, but I know a lot of different lawyer bloggers or legal bloggers submit them, and he kind of aggregates those and sends them out in an email a few times a week or once a week. The only thing I can think of that's not necessarily a blog directory is submitting your blog to different legal blog websites like Above the Law or Attorney at Work, right? So different already existing websites that collect guest blogs. You can always submit a guest blog there. Right. But those are the only ones that come to mind.
And we have a couple of questions. We have one from Tara Riley. Thanks for the question, Tara. What do you think about having a separate blog versus a page on your firm website? Does it really matter? This is a common question. I think that depends on much of what we said at the beginning. Is what is your spin? What is your angle? Are you doing, we are sort of presuming for the purposes of this webinar that you're doing it to attract clients, in which case I'm fond of it being hosted on your own website, because more content on your own website means more visibility for your website. Others will argue, and there's no perfect answer to this. I am of the belief that there's no perfect answer for this, Tara. Others will argue that having a separate website that points back to your business website is good for search engine optimization. So it really depends on what you want to do. Pirated Thoughts, one of our examples from earlier, used to be separate from the law firm of Morrison Lee, and it was at piratedthoughts.com. It is now, piratedthoughts.com now redirects to Morrison Lee. So It was separate for some time. It is now hosted on their website because they practice specifically in these trademark, copyright, and intellectual property issues. So I do not think that there is a perfect answer to this. I think it should depend, let your content do the writing for you, or make the decision for you, excuse me.
Yeah.
What are you going to be writing about, and how's it going to, and where do you think it belongs at that point?
Right. Okay, so in the I do have some thoughts on this, but
Okay.
in the interest of time, I'm gonna wait a little bit and maybe answer it a little bit
In
later.
the Q&A, yeah, let's get through it and we'll answer.
But I
Tamara
will
would.
answer this, Tara, because I
Yeah.
definitely have some strong feelings about this.
Okay.
But so a little bit of homework for you guys, just to kind of push you a little bit. We want you guys to write something this weekend. So if this is something that's been on your mind for a while, but you haven't had the opportunity, or you just haven't gotten around to doing it, we want you guys to do it this weekend. There's no reason to put it off anymore. Give it a little bit of thought. You have today, you have tomorrow to think about it. And then this weekend, write something. Get it down on paper or your computer. 300 words. That's not that much, right?
Mm-hmm.
And if you have somewhere to share it, Facebook, your social media, anywhere, share it and tag us in it so we can help you promote it as well.
Mm-hmm.
But get started. That's really the point of this little action item.
Yep. That's the point. So if you need any help, this is where you reach out. As we said at the beginning, as I said at the beginning, I'm Nick Rishwain. I'm Vice President of Client Relations.
I'll come back to that. Yeah, go ahead.
In development. Yeah, a little bit more information. I'm at Experts.com. Feel free to reach out to us at Experts.com. If you're looking for an expert witness, go visit Experts.com, look, search, do it yourself, contact me. I can help you out. Reach out. Happy to assist.
Mm-hmm. And as for me, of course, please reach out to me if you have any questions about blogging. We can talk about it. As for my business, we create videos, but still there's a huge written component to it. And of course, I've got experience in blogging, so I'd be happy to just chat about what's on your mind when it comes to your blog. But let's
and they should contact you for something else as well.
For videos.
Yeah, for video.
That is right. So that is what that's what we do for media. We create videos for lawyers. So if you're interested in not just blogging, but maybe looking into creating videos for your law firm, that is something we can handle. And you can find out more information at aboudmedia.com. Let me put it on here. Take some Q&A. And if there aren't any, I'll answer that question that I was holding off on. But I see questions in the chat room.
Yeah, so we do have, and we're now at the Q&A, guys. So if you have more questions, please send them in. If you don't, thank you for joining. But Q&A, we have a question for Tamara.
Okay.
Do you think attorneys should host their blogs on their own website or host their blogs on an independent standalone? So it's same question from Tara, and you did have some thoughts on this.
Okay, so I'll share this. So a few things here. I know that Kevin O'Keefe from Real Lawyers Have Blogs, who I respect, he's a strong proponent of not having your blog on your website. So he always talks about leaving it off your website. I tend to think that this question requires a deeper assessment of what your website even looks like or what purpose it serves. Because I think a lot of lawyers approach this from the angle that their website is really just an advertisement, and I don't think that's what it should be. I think your website is your online store, it's your online living room, it should welcome people. So of course your blog should be there, right? You want people to come to your house and find that valuable information online. So I think this requires us to step back and consider and think about why we even want people to not come to our website and go to our blog instead, right? Make your website so amazing that people want to be there and then read your information and be helped by you through your blog. So yes, I think it should be on your website. I think there's a lot of SEO benefits for it being there. There's a lot of content marketing benefits. If your website or if your blog makes sense to be there, if it's not related to the law whatsoever or related to what you do, then obviously don't put it there, right? It just, well, it might not make sense. But if it's related to your practice area, why not have it on your website?
Yeah, make it easy for the user to find it.
And just make your website better.
Yeah.
Don't make it a walking advertisement. That's not what it should be anyways.
Right. And our last question here, if we don't have any from anybody else, Mitch does ask in the chat, any favorite legal bloggers you recommend new bloggers follow to learn from? And I would point you back to Pirated Thoughts. It's my favorite to read when I have the opportunity to actually sit down and read one. It's very enjoyable and very informative on intellectual property.
Mm-hmm.
There's another one that I'm trying to think of. I had it a second ago, so maybe you can share one.
Yeah, I can jump in while you're thinking about that. So I think, Mitch, you write, I love the way you write. So I'm not sure which one you want me to mention, but streaminglawyer.com, I believe it is. The blog posts you write are very informative. They have a very unique tone to them, and I enjoy them. A friend of mine, Joey Vitale, his law firm is called Indie Creative Law, and he writes about intellectual property and business law as it relates to creative entrepreneurs. And the way he writes, I love how he does it, because it's also very informative, but it's written in a way that his intended audience will connect with it. They'll understand it. And it's so it's indiecreativelaw.com. You can go check that out.
Excellent. And let's see, should we pull up the last slide so that they can get our Twitter handles?
Oh, yeah.
That way, if anybody has to leave, at least they can grab the Twitter handles in case they have to want to tag us.
Sure. So myshingle.com is another really good blog that when I was starting off, I read that. So My Shingle, by Carolyn Elephant, she talks about just being a solo and thriving in today's world, today's legal profession, but her writing style is enjoyable as well.
Yeah, that's good. I have not read that one. That's interesting. I'll have to check that out. And we have Jaylyn asks, I'd love to know what other attendees of today's webinar have for blogs. So if you do have a blog already, please post it in the chat. We can put streaming.lawyer in the chat. That one I know. If anybody else has a blog, please let us know. And Mitch also asks, any service that allows consumers to listen to written blog posts like people do with books on audio and or Kindle.
Ooh, good question.
Yeah, allows us to listen to written blog posts while working or working out. Mitch, I don't know. It's not something I'm using. Do you know of one that you can share with us? Because that's something I probably would use.
Mm-hmm.
No, he does not know of one. That's interesting. I'll have to do some research on that.
Same here. I don't think that's a good one. I wonder if people would listen to a blog. Well, I don't see why not, I guess. But then it just becomes a podcast, perhaps.
That's then you may want to touch, there's also great podcasts to listen to that will give you lots of good content, but that's interesting.
But also, if for those who are here, if you don't have a blog already, because maybe we're assuming that you don't, why don't you write down what you're interested in writing about, like what you think your topic is going to be, or your blog topic, subject matter is going to be. Put it in the chat room just for accountability purposes, but also maybe we can bounce some ideas off of each other, and we'll wrap things up soon, because I know people probably have to get back to work. Yeah,
you probably have to get back to work, but give some ideas if you want. Or that you're looking into writing about. Tamara asks, would either of you please put together a separate blog post of individuals you enjoy reading their content? Maybe we might be able to send that in an email afterwards, the best list of 10.
Yeah, we can do that. We can put something together real quickly. But okay, so maybe we can wrap things up if there aren't any more questions, but you guys have our contact information in front of you on the screen. So please write it down. Please reach out to us, even if you just want to bounce some ideas off of us. And if we're not able to help, we can refer you to someone who can. A lot of great people are in the chat room today, so hopefully you can benefit from others who are here.
Yeah. Thank you everyone for coming, and we'll let you know when the next webinar is, and the next one will be on video, and we're aiming for the first week in June.
Mm-hmm. Hopefully we'll see you guys there. Good luck with your blogs. It really will be a great journey that you have to be consistent about and really put a lot of effort into, but the rewards of blogging are amazing and far outweigh any struggles that you might have when as you get it up and running. So stick with it.
Thank you guys. Thanks Tara. Thanks everybody for joining in, and we really appreciate it.
Thanks
Have a great day.
Bye.
Bye.
Am I supposed to stop recording?